Yeah. Okay, so very good to see you all. I'm Wendy Purcell, and I'm going to be chairing our session today on powering purpose-led university urban partnerships with the goals. So thank you for your patience while we sorted out the technicals. I'm delighted to be joined by Leah Nichols, who's the Executive Director of the George Mason University Institute for a Sustainable Earth. And Leah will be making sure we get to your questions today. So thank you very much for that, Leah. I really would like to introduce our wonderful panel. We're joined by Juan Azcárate, who's the Deputy General Director of Energy and Climate Change at Madrid City Council. We have Carlos Mataix, who is the Professor and Director of the Innovation and Technology for Development Center of the University Politécnica de Madrid. And we'll be joined also by Thomas Osdoba, who is the Senior Advisor at Climate-KIC. So I just want to frame the session just a little. And I think we all appreciate that delivering against the SDGs is going to rely on collaboration. I talk about radical collaboration, and that's to really reflect the scale and the impact that we need to see to create local and scalable solutions to fulfill the global goals. And I think it's here that we see where universities can make their fullest contribution. So connecting with other stakeholders around a shared purpose and bringing their knowledge and people assets to the society that we serve. So here we're taking a look at the shared purpose of tackling the climate crisis within an urban setting, with a focus on how a university is working with its city and wider stakeholder community. What we want to do is distill out the essential ingredients that power purpose-led partnerships, and actually learn more about how universities can exploit their convening power, their knowledge ecosystem, and their student networks to work in cities with public, private, and plural institutions. So let's get started with some discussion with our expert panel, and then we'll open up the session for dialogue with you. So please do post all of your questions. So Juan, I want to turn to you first, if I may. You've actually worked with the University UPM in Madrid for many years now, and I think it'd be helpful to have us understand how that collaboration has developed over time. So can I turn to you, Juan?
No, okay, thank you, Wendy, and it's a pleasure to be here in this panel, and yes, to talk about the long history of collaboration between the Madrid City Council and the Polytechnical University of Madrid, the UPM. And I would say that it has been developing from the previous stage was like a very fixed, very rigid in terms that we knew what we wanted from them, and for example, an inventory of greenhouse emissions. So we launch a contract, we pay for it, and we have a report and something like that. But it was like a very I mean, it's a very classical approach to the service they can provide to us. But afterwards, and working with them little by little, we realize, I think, that together by both sides, that to face these complex problems as climate change, it implies much more than engineering, technical, or analysis studies, and it's more about there is a lot of things that it has to be taken into account, as communication, governance, the social dimension, whatever. And now we try, and I think we have reached another way of collaboration that it's based on we want to learn together, and we share the target, and we want to learn together, and it's a very more flexible, sometimes difficult to put in our rigid administrative schemes, but it's now we are more partners than a contractor and a service provider.
That's fascinating. So you're talking kind of about that moving from a sort of transactional encounter too. I love the way you described of learning together. I think that's really beautiful. So Carlos, can you talk about this way of working and how it's creating value for the university? I think this is a big question as we think about how does this help us deliver against the academic mission of the university and actually supporting academic excellence within the institution. So maybe you can talk about this learning together and take us forward. If you unmute, Carlos, so we can just catch you. That's great.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conversation. As you mentioned, I think a key issue is to understand the kind of relationship in which we are working on, from a classical transactional way of doing things, according what the City Hall of Madrid is conceived as a funder, and we as a provider of knowledge, towards a more transformative way of relationship in which we together with other partners are coping with complex and wicked problems. Those are the kind of problems that our city is facing, or the cities are facing today. So this is something that is very easy to be said, but it's very difficult to be practiced, because it obliges us to do things in a different way. In fact, sometimes we say that we have to unlearn the things we have learned for many times. This also a very important issue is to go beyond the project logic. Of course, we undertake projects together, but our emphasis is in the system, is not in the project. The project is a tool to change the system, and the project is a space for learning, especially when the projects are interconnected. We at the city level, we need to change systems, and the only way we know to change the system is to intervene in different layers of the system, connecting the kind of innovations and practices we are undertaking at the financial, regulatory, technological, behavioral layers or subsystems of the system. And for this, the glue that makes this possible is, of course, trust. And it's true, as Juan mentioned, the relationship comes from a long history, but the history has been very important to as the foundation of a trustful relationship that makes possible to work in this new, I would say, in this new mode of working, of doing things.
So I think we're hearing from both of you this idea of a transactional encounter and now moving into, as you describe it, this transformational encounter. But you're also bringing up something very interesting, that the project, rather than just being a kind of deliverable, is actually the vehicle, and the fuel, if you like, is trust. And so that's what I'm hearing. And therefore, you also mentioned in that something very interesting, unlearning. So finding new ways to tackle the complexity. So maybe, I don't know, Juan and Carlos, do you want to just reflect on trust and the vehicle and unlearning? I mean, it's a very interesting space. Carlos, maybe kick off, and then I'll hand to Juan as Thomas is logging in.
If you want, I think the best way to behave the way is to be part of experience. Of course, we can think in training, we can think in capacity building in a classical way, but what makes possible to start practicing relationships and behaving in a way is only possible if you create the context the context in which the experiences of those that are there makes it's like a sense-making process based on experience, not only in training or in technical skills that you can offer. Training is important, capacity building is important, but what has been very important from the very beginning is to create a space of experiences and practices that is curated by a dedicated team that is able to design and sustain a new space of relationships where trust, learning is the day-to-day experience that they have.
That's great. Juan, did you want to reflect on any of those comments from Carlos?
Yes, of course. I think trust is one of the words I think is a key in this new way of working together. And I would say that this trust is not only when you create this trust is contagious. I mean, this is not only just the trust between the city and the university, but I think what we have built a space of based on university, where the neutrality, the trust, I mean, the atmosphere of working with others, private or the community and other urban actors are like a part of this atmosphere of trust. So this is not just I think what between these two organisms or bodies, but this is something that is very, very useful when you begin to work with others. That sometimes is difficult when you go with with your image of a local administration. So I think it's very, very, very nice to see how this space of trust, of neutrality, of continuity, even more than the political governments that we have every 4 years, and we have this kind of another way of working with other, I would say, other terms. The terms of reference of this new collaboration is completely different of the typical that the ones that we established from the local administration. So
I think we're hearing another ingredient there. We've heard trust. We're also hearing neutrality, and now you're also pointing to that kind of longevity, continuity that can work across some of the political changes and governance issues. So it all sounds really great that we can gather a city with its priorities and a university with its knowledge assets and values and mission, and we can bring them together around a shared purpose. And in this case, we're talking about the climate crisis and tackling that in an urban setting. So it sounds really great that we've got this activity going on. But I'd like to go a little bit deeper with both of you, if I might, just to think about drawing out these key ingredients. One of the things that we want to get from our session and from the Q&A is, what are these essential ingredients so that other universities with their city can start to take full advantage of all the work that you have done and start to enact some of these things themselves. So from your perspective, can you tell me a little bit about the things that enable and power, these very complex partnerships that you're describing? So Juan, maybe I can turn to you just to think from that point of view. What are the enablers that really, power these partnerships from your perspective?
Well, I would say that maybe it's very obvious, but I think that the knowledge that the disciplines of the university. I mean, the first approach is based on their very international experts on energy, on mobility, on buildings, architectural, school, engineering. So I think it could be. Well, it's part of the enablers. It may be very obvious, but it's something that it gives a lot of a richness on the potential collaboration. But But I would say that the university, not only the city, is a complex structure, and for us it has been really like a very particular enabler to find the ITD, I mean the institute that Carlos could talk about it later, that it's like an easy access to all the schools, the resources, the programs, the potential activities that the university is offering to the city. I mean, it's like a gateway to go into this complex world of the university, and we don't have to. I mean, they are the ones that give us the best research working group for this specific aspect. These people of telecom, or these people of the architectural school, or these people of whatever. I mean, they have this this vision from inside, and they give us this opportunity. So I think this kind of transversal I don't know if a transversal institute, but a transversal overview of the university, it has been a big enabler to build more and more on this, because we are not only focused in one specific researchers or a research group or a school or a faculty, well, I don't know how to call it, but I mean, it's more general, and it has been very, very useful for us, I think, and I don't know if it's something we would find in other universities or in other research institutions.
I think you're pointing to something really, really important for universities, and that is that we have behind the word university, all these wonderful assets, really knowledge assets. You're talking about smart people who are focused on tomorrow and tomorrow's problems, fantastic students. And actually, how from the outside can you reach in to actually gather some of those assets around the problem? And what you're pointing to there is this idea of a gateway. There is an easy access door directly into the university, and you can go to that door and talk about the issues. And then behind that door, and I'm going to turn to you, Carlos, as someone who's behind that door, you can then reach in to the university and assemble a suite of assets around that problem for that particular encounter. So Carlos, maybe talk about some of those enablers that you found. Maybe you can mention the kind of construct of this door, this gateway that you've called ITD, but maybe talk about those enablers, and then I'll turn to Thomas, who can give us some rounding comments about how we bring this all together around the climate crisis. So Carlos, talk about those enablers for us, and then we'll turn to Thomas and some questions.
I think that this idea of a gate that is friendly with those from public sector or companies that comes to university and find an adequate and unique answer is part of the success ingredient you want. But once you cross the gate, I think it is very important to go beyond the classical multidisciplinary environment where the disciplines are there but continues being in silos. What we have, we are being able to do is to go beyond multidisciplinary towards real interdisciplinary, because the kind of problems that Juan has in Madrid, most of the times cannot be solved by a single discipline. We need to put together researchers from different disciplines that are not used to collaborate in a typical way. This is one of the ingredients. The other is to transmit a culture of what we say, and Thomas can talk about this, the challenge problem approach. That we are not solving the kind of problems that our department or research group is interested in. First of all, we are working around problems that the city and the challenge owner, in this case the City Hall of Madrid, has to cope with. So this challenge owner approach, that is one of the keys of the Climate-KIC strategy and approach, has been also very, very important, and is one of the things that needs a big effort, because our researchers are used to think in terms of their own incentives. Let it be incentives in terms of research, of education, or whatever. And what we are trying to do, and sometimes we success, is put the problem, the big problem, the wicked problem, on the middle, on the center of our attention. And let's work together around this, with the City Hall, also with the companies, and of course with the society.
So I'm getting this idea that, we have, the complex issue. It arrives at the gateway of the university, and it's kind of put at the center of the table, and around it we can gather these assets and knowledge assets and people assets. So you're really describing this adaptive leadership challenge in many ways. You put it at the center. That's the kind of the problem, or that becomes our shared purpose, and we gather around it in a really interesting way. And that's a great segue, I think, to welcome you, Thomas. Thank you for battling with some of the technical issues today. So we wanted to hear about the shared problem, which is the climate crisis, and maybe how this new resource that we're talking about here, which is cities working with their universities around the shared purpose, in this case, the climate crisis, how can this new collaboration that's really driven by purpose, this new partnership, how can it help us tackle the climate emergency? And maybe in your answer, you could also touch on things that you think enable this engagement between universities and cities around climate. So welcome.
Great, thanks very much, and happy to be here. Sorry for slight delay in joining, but good to be here with you all. So I think maybe just a couple of brief comments around, the city context around climate action and climate emergency is something that maybe doesn't get as much broad coverage and discussion as, say, how various countries and corporations and whatnot are addressing climate. But I would say that cities have probably the most extensive and comprehensive set of both relationships as well as actions and strategies that they're actually responsible for implementing. So it's not simply a matter of adopting policy or setting targets. They actually have to figure out strategies and how to implement those strategies over many, many, many years. Doing that in the context in which they work is quite challenging, as I think Juan knows all too well. It requires an oftentimes new set of knowledge. It requires bringing together a set of skills and experiences that aren't always there. People who are trained to be engineers for the city or city planners or policy, analysts aren't all grounded deeply in climate. For many of us, we were already out of school and in the working world before this even became something on the radar. So there's a gap between the sort of knowledge, skills, and capabilities that are needed inside city government to tackle this enormous set of challenges and what they have. And universities are very well responding to that need by trying to figure out how to both fill that gap directly, but also change how they're educating and the collaborations that they can form with city government. I'll just pause there if you want to pick in and direct this a little bit, but I could talk a little more specifically about some examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, some examples would be good, and also just to focus on the things that, the kind of magic ingredients. We touched on a few already in our session around trust, around having a gateway, being prepared, I think, to learn together, as Juan talked about, but also unlearning, and I think you've also sort of touched on that. So we're really teasing out these key ingredients. So really anything that you have from your broad reflections, I think, working with a number of universities and a number of cities would be wonderful, Thomas. Yeah.
Great. So with Climate-KIC's current program to help cities, I think we recognized a few things. One of which is that cities who are mobilized around us have been working pretty hard on climate action for a long time, more than 10 years, many cases more than 20 years. So they have pretty mature strategies and they have an understanding of the kinds of things they want to do. They've baselined their emissions, they've developed action plans, etc. So they're not coming from zero. So it's really important to meet cities where they're at in that process. We also looked at what programs have been out there globally to help cities, and we said, okay, there need to be more resources and a more focused and intensive support for a longer period of time. It can't be a 1 or 2 year process, and it can't be a few €100,000. It has to be a deep, sustained investment if we really want cities to get to the next level of that this work requires. So I think that that's been a significant learning. And then we identified a couple of years ago 10 cities that in Europe that wanted to work together to experiment on different ways of working. Almost every one of them have a university collaborating quite closely with them, although in different ways, because they're all different countries and cities, and the university relationships they have are different. In Madrid, with UPM and with the city council, there's a relationship there that's deep and long-standing. In other places, it's a new set of relationships. And so what we find ourselves doing is building those relationships with investment as a third party to support that relationship and help deepen it. I think the other thing that we try to do in our program is recognize that some things are really difficult for cities to do, almost impossible for universities to do in partnership, and that's really our job. So we can't just be a funder and step away. We have to be there with a point of view, and as I say to folks like Juan and other cities as well, there are things you can't say to your mayor and your city council that I can. And it's important that somebody takes that role on and says, takes that role and is willing to have that interaction, because it gives city council the ability to hear and listen to very difficult things, because they're going to have to act on them. And I don't have to make it their job. I don't have to put the political burden on the mayor or staff to bring that issue into the discussion. I can put it on the table. And it's a lot easier if I'm the one who's also investing in this program, doing it at the same time, and say, we're here to invest in you and this process, and we're here to help you tackle very difficult subjects together. I'm not just funding it, and I'm not just dropping the difficult topic and then walking away. I'm still in this partnership. And I think that's been a really powerful lesson for everybody to see. And it allows people to play their role in the process and not have to be superheroes, because we're not going to solve this if people have to be superheroes all the time. That's not realistic.
Yeah. I think you're also pointing to a respect for, you're also pointing to the sense of one of the key ingredients that Juan mentioned, which was the neutrality of the university. It means that the university can work with any configuration around the political makeup of a city without compromising that as well. So I think we're recognizing and respecting the different partners, but bringing, as you say, them into relationship in a way that's, you're just kind of describing an ecosystem, which I really like. So Leah, I think we're ready to turn over for some questions. So Leah, I think you're going to unmute and ask a question. So please,
sure, I did have one question.
Full advantage, yeah.
Thank you. And I will encourage everybody else on the line to either ask a question in the chat, or if you'd like, I think we can put you on screen as well if you'd like to ask it in person. But my question for this panel, which has been excellent, and I do apologize for all those technical difficulties getting us together. And this comes from about 10 years of work in the US federal government space. So with that caveat, I was finding that the sort of very rigid bureaucracies of the government really sort of got in the way, or it was very difficult to try innovation or create the space to create opportunities to innovate. Universities, or especially in sustainability, are all about drawing those sort of interconnections and looking at the intersections of, society and environment and so on and so forth. But the government, at least in the federal space that I was operating, very siloed, very bureaucratic, with long histories, and sort of breaking out of those sort of the decades or centuries of momentum was very, very difficult. Do you have thoughts on how the university-city relationship can really create opportunities?
Can we ask Juan to kick off with that? Because I think, you mentioned that in your opening remarks about, the transactional, you can have a contract and that's really easy. But then when you moved into this learning together, it gets a bit more complicated in the bureaucratic sense. So I think it'd be great to hear from you.
Yes, and yeah, we face the same rigid and strict rules and so on. But for example, through learning, learning together, I mean, through the learning opportunities that the university and the Climate-KIC has give us, we have, for example, create a climate group that is a senior technical people from different areas that are engaged in this learning, and be part of the learning becomes after to be part of something bigger, and something to find solutions, something to be engaged with this kind of a platform. So yeah, it has been this special relationship has been also, or has become in some kind of innovative solutions of the way we are working inside the City Hall. Of course, we are on silos, but for example, now we are working just as an example, we have a small program of students working as an internships in the city, Madrid City Studio, and we have 10 people and 10 students of master degrees, and they are working in 8 different areas of the municipality with different people as mentoring them. So it's a way also of creating connections between these silos inside the city, and it is sometimes through this relationship with the university, and also the support of Climate-KIC as a big framework of a European European project that it's also very well seen and well respected by our political conciliars or mayors or vice mayors.
So you're probably talking about that kind of sense of innovation and taking risk, and then it suddenly becomes normalized within the bureaucracy, but that takes time and a lot of patience and work, I'm sure. So Leah, we hand back to you for questions.
So we have 2 great questions that came in and very little time left, so we'll be brief. But from Julio, what do you think are the main benefits for the leadership teams of both the city and the university to support this radical collaboration, and what incentives can be put in place to encourage it?
So Carlos, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I'm sure Carlos may have some things to add to it as well. If I think about the benefits, obviously I'm going to try to address that beyond the sort of climate impact piece, which is the sort of why are we here. But the benefits to the teams and the collaboration, I think they fall into 3 categories. I think one is you're very rapidly building a depth of understanding of the different perspectives and what it means to be a senior bureaucrat with huge operational responsibilities within a city government, for keeping the lights on and for keeping the water running and so on. And they don't have a lot of time to step away from those operational responsibilities and really think about questions that are on the horizon. And I think that it creates a real deep understanding together. I think the second category has to do with the quality of relationships as it relates to both understanding how to let other people contribute to leadership. Oftentimes we are trained that we need to be leaders in these conversations, and sometimes it's all about letting other people play that leadership role and not insisting on that. And that builds a lot of trust very quickly, which is critical to difficult work. And then I think the sort of third category is by coming together in this way, there's almost always an opportunity to make an existing stack of resources go further, or find pathways to additional resources to support this work. And I think universities in particular are always looking for that, but actually in the city climate space, cities are also looking for those resources. And by coming together, they're far better positioned to access resources that are available to them.
And I think you're touching on another, I don't know why there's a technical now, but I can hear myself back. But I think you're also touching on another ingredient here, and that's humility. The humility, you talked about unlearning, but learning together and so on. So Leah, a final question in the last 2 minutes.
Absolutely. This is from Chuck, how can HBCUs, Indigenous colleges and universities, and MSIs, or minority serving institutions, benefit from the purpose-led university urban partnerships for the goals? And how can this improve racial equity, inclusion, and resilience?
An easy question. Very easy.
Yeah, maybe I could just chime in. I've had the benefit of working on both sides of the Atlantic, and so some experiences there as a starting point. I think to Chuck's question, I'll maybe focus more in the United States because I know that a little bit better. But I think this is also relatively true in Canada as well. One is there has never been more support from the philanthropic community for initiatives like this than there is now. There are foundations like the Kresge Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and many others who are funding a category of work that they haven't done before. And it speaks, sorry about the background noise, it speaks directly to this area of work. I think that's one. I think another would be to consider maybe a few menu items that you could pull together around how to put that into place. Not try to do everything that all these partnerships are doing, but do one thing and really explore that. And so there, University of Oregon had a program where the university would pick one city and they would work very intensively with that one city. All departments, all resources directed at that one city for a year as a way to deepen a relationship and really create a value case for building, not just a one-time partnership, but a durable partnership over time. There are many more ways, but that's just a couple examples I'm sure Carlos can add to.
I think we're out of time. So I think it's really, I think we're out of time, Leah. Is that right? Or can we take another second? Or
I think the next bit of the agenda for the conference is networking. So I think you could take a minute.
So yeah, please do, Carlos. So this kind of extends our discussion into how do we create this everyone in sense of equity and inclusion. And I think that really speaks to the kind of work that you're doing.
Okay. So do I have 2 minutes?
Yes.
Well, Juan used the word connections several times. I think this is key. We have to be aware that we are creating a connecting tissue of sometimes unlikely friends that if this kind of collaboration between the city and the university would not exist, would not be produced. Mm-hmm. So once we are able to create this space of collaboration, we have the opportunities to bring to the table two unlikely actors, indeed minorities, creative groups, activists, working together with more conventional actors. But for doing this, we have to invest in connections. And the market of funds for universities is not prepared for this. We receive money to work on projects, to deliver packages of knowledge, but we don't receive the support to work, creating this tissue to work in the connections. But I have to say that thanks to Climate-KIC and especially the program Deep Demonstration, we have found a partner that has understood the importance of investing, creating these collaborations, and as Juan mentioned before, to do it in a continuous long-term way. It is very, very rare, but very important. And if we are aiming for the SDG 17, Partnership for Development, we have to understand and we need the invisible infrastructures that are organizational, that are social, that are also based on trust. And these structures have to be created. And we need the resources, financial, institutional, and knowledge to make these important tissues of diverse organizations and heads and points of view.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you to all of our panel, Juan, Carlos, Thomas. Thank you, Leah, for handling the questions, and I hope that those who are engaging with the session have a real sense of a call to action. You know, that the universities really step up, and I think hopefully we fully realise our convening power and our knowledge and people assets, and make our fullest contribution now to delivery against the goals. So thank you very much, panel. We're happy to stay here for the rest of the conference to answer your questions. Please reach out to us. There's such a generosity from all of you. So I really appreciate all of your
Thank you,
work. So
Wendy.
thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much, Carlos, as always. Thank you, Leah.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.